Hey there, welcome to Authentically Raw. I'm your host, Jamie Berris. Hello, Dara Zycherman, and welcome to the Authentically Raw podcast. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for agreeing to be a guest. I have been honestly thinking about this for a couple of months because you just have such, I know you're going to have a lot of fascinating knowledge for our listeners. So first I'm going to introduce you as a professional organizer and a minimalist lifestyle coach. So tell us more about what that means.
Sure. What I learned early on with all of my friends and family who I used to organize for when I was quite young is that when people are struggling, they think of it as an organizing problem. So they're just faced with a bunch of stuff in front of them. They know it's too much stuff. They don't know how to find things, and they're not sure how to organize it. Really like basic issues that we all face. And what I learned through that process is that's what people reach out and ask for help about. But underneath it, there is so much more. And that's where the minimalist lifestyle coaching comes in, because when I would professionally organize for folks, you know, I started my own business. I wasn't just doing it for friends and family anymore. I saw that a lot of what I was doing was coaching them through the emotional unpacking of the issues that led them to the place of chaos that they were now finding themselves in. And sure, I could go in and put papers and files that were logical and made sense. I could advise them to get rid of some things and put a bunch of things in fancy containers. But I knew personally that that was not going to fix their problem. I knew it would make them feel a sense of relief in the short term, but then they were going to continue to struggle. So my goal, both as an organizer and a coach, is to educate people about why and how to organize in a way that makes their lives easier, that makes it simpler, and to help them unpack all of the guilt and the shame, the emotional attachments to their items, all of their current practices that are bringing in all of the things that they have. And a lot of shoulds that people feel around having to accept gifts and other material items from folks. There's just a lot of stuff in our culture that we accept blindly because we don't have time to unpack it all. But when people come to me, that's really what my job is. It's, yeah, in the end, things are going to be organized, you're going to have less stuff. But what's all the work we can do leading up to that and going through it to make this process less painful and to make sure you never have to go through it again?
That is fascinating. And you have a TED Talk too, and I was going to jump ahead and dive right into that, but I think now I want to push that back a little bit because as you're speaking, I'm thinking of so many things, and a couple things. Number one, I always call it my Monica closet, back from, you know, watching Friends back in college. She was like, you know, Miss Organizer, you know, clean freak, but she had the Monica closet where you open the closet and just everything came tumbling out. And I so relate to that because I'm that type. I don't like stuff on my counters. I don't like stuff laying around the house, but I like to, I have no problem shoving things in drawers, and, you know, I can barely close the drawer. You know, it's like, take your arm and shove everything in there, throw everything in a closet, out of sight, out of mind. I feel good, but yet it's all in there. And of course, then I start thinking about that. It's, oh my gosh, you know, I overanalyze. It's like me, I'm just stuffing everything inside. Oh no.
Exactly.
I was thinking about that when you were talking, but I was also thinking about just even the difference between my husband and I don't like stuff. And I could bring boxes to Goodwill every day and I'd be totally happy with that. Where he's more of a collector. He likes to keep things. And there's a space in the garage up above where, oh gosh, I can't even walk up there. But just 2 weekends ago, we were up there and we were finding a lot of really cool treasures, like the old Sony Walkman, the yellow one from back with my kids and things. He has all this stuff, whereas I'm like, get rid of it, burn it, whatever. So I was thinking about that, but then I was also thinking of a third thing, And that is just driving around. So here in Michigan, it's springtime, but we can, there's not the full leaves and everything right now. So you can see the junk sometimes that accumulates and piles up in people's yards. And whether it's old cars, tires, just stuff. And I honestly, it's like that sort of thing. If I had to pull into a driveway and look at that, heart palpitations. But there's a reason people do that too. So with just even those 3 examples, I'm just so curious, because you started out as a professional organizer, and then, it turns more into the minimalist, coaching. And I guess just even with those 3 examples, how do you go about that? What type of client do you see most? Like, what's the biggest problems and areas that you deal with? I asked you a lot of questions.
No question. That's okay. I'm organized, so I can follow. So in terms of, let me go to actually your last question about the types of clients. So I meet with quite a range of clients, anywhere from a widowed retiree who's 70 years old to much younger folks. I have like a 30-something-year-old male professor that I help organize. And so it really goes within that range, because these are all universal problems. So going back to your comment about Monica's closet, that is something I see often, not with everybody. Some people don't care about having their surfaces completely clear, and some struggle to even do that. But there are folks like you who actually really do enjoy that aesthetic, and they want it to feel the sort of lightness of not having things in their visibility all the time. But then this sort of minutia that we have to go through to make that happen is tedious for a lot of folks. Because again, you also don't have the issue of having such sentimental attachment that you're not able to give away stuff. You're saying, oh, I can go to Goodwill. And I do have a lot of clients like that too. Not all of my clients are very emotionally attached to their stuff. Some need more of a, like the professor I mentioned, he actually doesn't have that much stuff, to be honest. Like, he's kind of a minimalist, but just maintaining and creating systems and organizing is very difficult for him on the onset, and then he can maintain it once he has it. So some folks have those sets of issues. And so it's really about having the discipline to sit down and go through the drawers and go through the closet, because you kind of mentioned this, you bottle it up all inside. There's the physical manifestation of it and the emotional. And we all know that when you bottle stuff inside and you repress it, you can kind of get by for a while. And then one day it starts to come out, and when you least expect it and you least want it to. So that's where this sort of like home and mind and heart all kind of intersect, and we have to unpack things. The comment you made about your husband being a collector and keeping more things, also another universal situation I see a lot. And that's one that brings up a few things to mind. One is that minimalism can look different for everybody. And the reason that's true is because we all care about different things. The things that are most important to have in my life might not be in someone else's. I don't know if you could see behind me, I have a record player with some records. I have a guitar. These are things that I care about. For most people, those would be extraneous, right? And so for somebody who likes to collect certain things, those aren't extraneous for them. They're important, so maybe they belong in that home. That being said, another thing that we have to talk about when looking at minimalism are trade-offs. And just because you like something doesn't always mean that that's a good enough reason to keep it. So I've liked shirts that I've had in my closet. They're fine. I had them for a long time. Maybe they're a little sentimental. But if I'm not wearing them enough, or if I don't like them enough, or the tag itches me too much, I might give up the fact that I have a good memory associated with them, or that I wear it sometimes, to have a more streamlined closet. So collectors, it's not that they can never collect anything, because that might be part of their lifestyle. It's that how much good is something being shoved in a box in a garage? How much good is that worth? So it's finding a balance between a simple, light, easy lifestyle and some of these things that we love, and trying to understand that difference between, I like this thing, it would be nice to have, versus this is so important to me, I can't live without it. And then we kind of meet in the middle there, because it is very cool. This happens a lot. People rediscover things in their home. They're like, oh, this is so cool. I'm so glad I saved this, because they have this momentary joy. But it is a fleeting joy that is not going to last, right? And those fleeting joys are not reasons to keep things. I see this all of the time. And so it's good that you unpacked it, but for most folks, when they go through that process, it's like, okay, let's thank these items for showing up one last time, but we don't really need them. They're not a part of the new lifestyle we're creating.
Exactly. And, I can honestly say some of our probably biggest fights have been over me just grabbing stuff and either throwing it in the dumpster or dropping it off at Goodwill. And then it'll be like months or even years later. Where is this? Where is that? And how dare you touch my stuff? And I get that. But honestly, one of the first, this was probably, I know it was over 15 years ago, because it was in our old house, and I was putting laundry away. I was putting his socks away, and I couldn't even close his sock drawer. And I looked at all of these socks. I'm like, they're dingy. They're not even white anymore. Some of them had holes. I'm like, scooped them out, threw them in the trash, grabbed him some new socks just at the grocery store when I was there. He was so mad. How dare you? But they're my socks. And I'm like, I understand that. But it is, I see how we're so extreme in that way. I mean, there are things I'm attached to. Don't get me wrong. I am very, sentimental. But it is something, if I'm not using it, I don't see the point in, storing it. And he's the opposite way. And so, it's more, it's not just about organization. It's more,
absolutely.
It's so much more than that.
Yeah. And by the way, we call that sock bankruptcy. You declare sock bankruptcy. All my socks, they're holes. I only have one sock of this one. They're all old. And you just get rid of them all and you start fresh. But I find this a lot. It's tough with couples that I work with, even the ones that are trying very hard to be on the same page, because of exactly what you mentioned. Yeah. Each person in the partnership cares about different things. And they feel that the thing that their partner cares about doesn't make as much sense as the thing that they care about, which is obviously why they care about the things they do. And so oftentimes, one member of the couple will come to me, if you could just get him to get rid of this thing. I don't know why he's so crazy. He keeps these things. And then the other will come to me like, if you could just get her to get rid of those things. I don't know why she's so disorganized. So it's funny. It's like we all see it differently. And it's really easy when you're like me and you live by yourself, you get to be in charge of everything. And when you're working together, it's like you're doubling the challenges. So my hats are tipped off to, all couples who are managing their various preferences. Yeah. Right.
I couldn't even believe it, because in the garage up above, we have 4 kids, and we've got these bikes from when they were, toddlers that I thought we had pitched years ago, because I'm like, yeah, we're done with this bike. Either go give it away, or, most of them are, by the time we're done with them, they're pretty much shot. They're ruined. It's time for the dumpster. They were up in the garage, and I thought we had thrown them away years ago. And I'm just suffocated. I thought, just leave, just walk away. No big deal. I am thinking too, though, just even the organization of there's, say just with home life, business, there's a different type of organization than having your house, whether we save things or we're, declutter. But then there is, you mentioned filing, things like that. Like he is amazing at that sort of thing.
Mm.
Not so much. I mean, I don't know. Everybody organizes different, but I do
Exactly.
feel like in certain areas of our life, we can be really organized. And then in other areas, I don't know, but speaking personally, I feel like there's some areas that just knock it out of the park. And then there's somewhere I'm like, get it together. And I sometimes wonder why is it so hard in one area? Like when I walk in my office, I don't know. It's just loose papers everywhere. I mean, it's like I'll get binders and I'll do this, or I'll try to organize things on my computer in folders. And it just, I have the hardest time sticking with that sort of thing. Do you see certain people? There's just certain areas where it's so challenging. And I guess, yeah, how do you get on track?
That totally makes sense. Because it's kind of like with everything else, right? Like we're good at some things and we're not good at other things. Some things we find more tedious than others. For you, it's easy to clear a surface because you like a surface to be clear. So that's an easier task for you. But sometimes with office management, we forget that it's actually information management and it's action management. Right? So a piece of paper isn't an object, it's a piece of information. And that's true of our digital spaces as well. And we often get confused because of how those things are housed. You know, we think, well, the paper is an object if you're thinking about your house where everything is objects. But if you're thinking about your office as information and actions, then a piece of paper starts to look different. And you start to think about different ways that you could capture that information. Also keeping in mind, I actually forgot to mention something, which is communication management, right? So our communication is housed in email, it's housed on phones, it's housed with text messages. Depending on our age group, it might be housed in old letters or other communications we get on paper. So those are all different things, and some of them are overlapping, but I think email is a great example of how we treat the idea or the house of something, which is the email account, as its own entity, when in reality, emails are a few different things. It's receiving information like a newsletter. So it's like reading information that has very few action items associated. It's receiving a coupon, which is a completely different set of information. Or it's getting an email that you have to respond to. Or it's an email you have to respond to after you complete an action. Those are wildly different things. They have nothing to do with each other. It's just the format they arrive in is the same, in the same place. So when people have trouble in their offices, it's no surprise, because now we have digital, we have paper, we have communication, we have information. We know we have the internet at our disposal, but we think if we save certain information, we'll do so, and then we have to-do lists and we have calendars. I mean, it's a kind of a miracle when we can get a system that works well, because all of those things are intersecting, all of them. And you can't figure out one without figuring out the others.
So true. It makes so much sense, because I can get really overwhelmed in that whole information overload, because there's so many things I want to save. And if you don't have everything broken up into little folders, throw this email in there, or even with your items on your desk, it just piles up, and pretty soon it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I mean, I even feel like that in the whole writing process. I'm constantly reading and researching and doing all this, and I'm taking notes, and pretty soon it's like I overdo it. Like there's way too much information coming at me. And now it's like, what's the challenge is, how do I organize it all? How do I, get it to make sense and this and that? And I think of how it's the minimalist part of it. Like minimize. I over prepare, over plan, which gives me way too much information. I don't know how to organize it all and make sense of it all. And you freeze. And that's where you come into play, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
No, and you made a good point of bringing minimalism into this, because you could organize all of that information. Information's actually one of the easier things to organize in a way, right? Like it's like you can just categorize everything and put it together, but it's going to still be too overwhelming. And I always think about what the impetus for action or the impetus for retrieval is, because oftentimes I've gone through people's filing systems. So they had a system. It's gotten crazy, but they did have something to begin with. And then they see all these folders in there where they've collected, I don't know, recipes or articles, never looked at them once because there was never an impetus to do so. So that's a quick aside, that's like a piece of the puzzle. But the minimalism really comes in where if you can get to a point where you've essentially, I'm just going to use the word delete, but gotten rid of, like deleted tons of information that you don't really need to store, it means that when you're in process of learning something new and you're over preparing and you're overdoing it, that won't be as overwhelming because you don't also have a huge backdrop of other things that aren't important to you. So that's like step number one. And it just reduces overwhelm. It reduces the amount of space that you're trying to squeeze into. But yes, then you start getting into optimization and productivity habits that make that a more streamlined process for sure.
For sure. Well, and that is true because just taking the time out, because sometimes, I don't have time to organize. I don't have time to, oh my gosh, that is just, of course. Sit down, do it, and you're going to be way more productive. You made a comment about, like, say, recipes or things like that. I cleaned out, I have I found in the pantry, the old recipe box. And it's just overflowing. I could barely close it, but I hadn't touched it. I never touch it because you can get recipes online everywhere, social media, every place. And I thought, okay, it's time. Go through this, throw stuff away. And it was hard to throw some things away because you're like, oh, I still never tried it. I'm like, Jamie, you wrote this recipe down from probably a magazine 20 some years ago, throw it away.
Right.
The ones I kept there was some, like there was one in my grandma's handwriting, that was hers. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to keep that one. And there was, some from a few friends from, I remember like, oh my gosh, we're barely married a year and I got this, saved a few of those things, but putting that then away, it felt so good. Like and it took me 10 minutes and
that's great.
It's something little and it's simple, but and every single time we click on a recipe or click on something, it's so easy to save it. For years, this is hard to even admit. For years, my emails, I never even put things in folders. I had literally just had the hundreds that I would just scroll down or flag or search. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. I'm sure you see that a lot.
Yes.
I want to take a little shift because you have a TED Talk and I watched it. It's great. So it is labeled The Dark Side of Gift Giving, correct? The darker side?
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, this was born out of one of these trade-offs, actually. These moments where I'm talking to clients and even talking to friends and family, because I bring that up in the TED Talk as well, where we're experiencing something good, right? Like receiving a gift doesn't always, but can feel good. Getting a gift for somebody might feel good. Having family traditions where there's gift exchanges. These aren't like terrible things, right? Like sometimes when we're talking about downsizing and organizing, we can really point to something and say, hey, this is just not good to begin with, right? But what I'm talking about here is something where we actually do kind of have a good positive association with it, but it doesn't mean that it actually is the best thing for us. Because lots of times people have excitedly given me gifts and they're telling me how perfect it is and how happy they found it for me. And inside I'm thinking, I understand why they got this, why they thought I might like it, but I don't, and I don't want it. And now I'm going to have to deal with it. And now I have a homework assignment. I have something on my to-do. Instead of making my life easier by giving me a gift, they've actually made my life harder, either emotionally or because now I have some task associated with this. And I also know people who feel really stressed out and pressured to find gifts for people who aren't asking for the gifts in the first place. And that's another problem. And then I think our society started to notice this and started talking about green gift giving and like giving handmade gifts. But these are giving gift certificates. These all have associated problems too. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've looked through many people's homes where they have 10 scarves made by friends and family members that they never wear, but they can't get rid of. And people who have gift cards that they never use and they don't know where to put them. And then I have to come up with an organizing system for them for their gift cards. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's this sort of like rolling down the hill over this idea of gift giving, when the truth of the matter is people, yes, experiences are very important, but again, those have to be experiences that everyone agrees that they want to share. Because, getting someone an experience that they don't want, which I have seen as well, that someone buys them a gift certificate to do something, they don't actually want to do it, so they never use it. It has to all be agreed upon, but that's the thing that people care about. Everyone is so busy. They just want to spend time with each other. And I'll also mention an example. I may have mentioned this in the TED Talk, I'm not sure. But when I was preparing for it, I actually talked to some people about their varied experiences. Because what I saw was that people would first start out saying how much they liked it. By the end of the conversation, they realized how much they didn't and all the problems with it. And so I was talking actually to my brother, who has 2 kids, 2 very cute nieces of mine. And my parents love my mom loves buying my nieces gifts, right? She loves buying kid stuff for kids. I do believe that gives her some joy, but what it does is it makes my brother's life much harder because he has to organize all of this stuff, and then the kids have too much stuff because of all the grandparents giving stuff, and then now he has problems on his hands. But what he really needs is, swim lessons and financial help in paying for his kids' swim lessons. And so that's an experience that the child wouldn't be having with somebody else, but the child will benefit from. So that's an example, I think, of an experience where it makes sense to get that as a gift because it's very specific to what somebody needs and wants. And it's hard, my mom doesn't, she's a very generous, wonderful person, right? Like she wants to do all these things for her nieces, but those might not be the things that they need the most, even though she sees the look of joy in their eyes when they receive the gift. So gift giving is way more complex than we realize. And that's why I call the talk the darker side of gift giving, because again, it's an example of something we see only in a positive light. But when you really unpack it, it's far more complicated. And there's a better way to show people our love and generosity. And we just have to dig a little bit deeper to do that.
I just know as you're speaking, I'm thinking, yes. But I love that right in the beginning, you point out, because I think this is really hard for people to truly admit that the darker side of gift giving is, sometimes you receive things that you don't necessarily want, and you have all that guilt of, well, now what am I supposed to do with it? And it was a very thoughtful thing, and you appreciate that, and it is someone being generous and showing love and all of that. And even if it's not a personal gift to you, like you said, your mom likes buying your nieces gifts. That's awesome. And I can remember too, when the kids were real small, just the junk, the toys that you're kicking through all the time. And it's like, stop. Every time they come home from a friend's, family, wherever, they're bringing just trinkets. It's junk. And then you've got to be the bad guy, right? Clear the rest, throw it away. And then there's tears, but it's like, you haven't touched it in 2 months. There's so much going on. And even if it's adults giving adults gifts, you have these 12 handmade scarves or whatever. And there's that sentimental value. You're appreciative, but you don't need that many. Are you a bad person for giving it away or re-gifting? There's so much involved in gift giving. And I love that you pointed on the fact about, there is stress in trying to find a gift.
A lot.
And I just feel like I'm actually in that position right now. Yesterday, I went to 4 different stores looking for a gift for someone. There wasn't anything. And I left and I thought, you know what? I just want to write a handwritten note. spend some
Yes.
time together, go out for
Mhm.
dinner, go out for lunch, or go do an experience together,
Mhm.
something like that, because I'm just buying something that, I mean, I don't know how she's going to
Mhm.
receive it. It might not be something she
Yep.
wants, you know?
Right.
And
Exactly.
I do have a friend that we started to do that. Let's go do something
Mhm.
together. And
Yeah,
it's a great
that's so lovely.
excuse to, yeah, like, what do we want to do? And agree on something.
Mhm.
And I think that's the hard thing. We always want to surprise with
Yeah.
gifts. And so
Mhm.
even if it's an experience, that might not be
Mhm.
what they want to do. And then they feel obligated to do that with you. And I can't tell you, or maybe you've witnessed this too. I can't tell you how many
Mhm.
times I've witnessed, people saying, oh, we're going to go out for dinner for this person's birthday. And
Mhm.
I'll ask for something like, oh, is that their favorite place? Oh, I don't know. I never asked them. It's like, but I like it. It's like, I don't even know whose birthday is.
Is it? Yeah.
That's kind of off the
Oh.
subject of that. But it just kind of goes back the darker side of the
Mhm.
gift giving, and on both sides, and
Mhm.
how to find that balance.
Mhm.
Truly
Yeah,
is
and I love
key.
that you mentioned, yeah, that you mentioned handwritten notes, because
Mhm.
aside from spending time with somebody, telling somebody how you feel about them or complimenting them, I don't
Mhm.
care what your love language is, like, people appreciate that because
Mhm.
it's so rare. And if you do it on on an actual note instead of a text message, although, hey, text messages are still are great, I get those too. I'm happy. But that's such a beautiful thing. And no one in the history of the world has ever been upset to get a nice note about
Right.
themselves. And then yes, that might be something they too feel like, maybe I should keep this, but now we're talking about a slip of paper, and we're not
Mhm.
talking about objects. And it's not something that the person who gave it expects to see in the home or is going to ask about their use of or their experience of. So it really allows the owner of that note to decide when they're ready to let it go.
Right.
The same guilt isn't associated with it. So I think I'm so glad you brought up handwritten notes, because I think they're
Yeah.
a lost art.
Well, and even with that, even if you did throw it away,
Yeah,
it's you still remember it. You felt it. You
exactly.
remember, you
Hmm.
might not remember the exact words, but you remember how they
Hmm.
made you feel.
Hmm.
There's like quotes like that, or whatever. But so you do carry that with you. And just knowing
Hmm.
that someone actually took the time to tell
Hmm.
you what they were
Hmm.
thinking, that is such a gift. It is a
Yeah,
gift.
and for those of your listeners who don't like writing notes, I'll tell you something else you can do, because I've challenged myself with this. I'm more of like, I like to write the note because I have time to think about it, and then I'm not in that moment saying those things out loud to someone. Sometimes that's a little hard, right? To sit across from somebody, look into their eyes, and tell them something, even if they're a long-held friend and you know them really well. So one year I challenged myself that instead of writing a note, I would literally say the things to their face. And I found that it was even more impactful in some ways. Yeah, they didn't have the note to look at later, but to have that experience, like, how often do we just sit across from somebody and tell them nice things about them and how much we care? We
Mhm.
might do that with our partners, or our kids, but we don't always do that with friends or other family members, or sister and a
Yeah.
brother and niece, nephew. So yeah,
Mhm.
those moments I think are treasured much more than we realize.
Definitely. And I think one thing this makes the whole conversation makes me think of, whether it's, just like the minimalist and just organizing and gifts, and, to tie it all up with a bow, right? What's really at the bottom line of it, though, it's a feeling. Like, even when you're giving a gift, or you're giving love, or it could be
Mhm.
excitement. I mean, it's the giving and receiving, but there's feelings attached
Mhm.
to all of it. And
Mhm.
we don't have to attach these feelings necessarily to
Mhm.
an object. It's
Mhm. Exactly.
and it goes back to the experience and doing something with someone. But even when it comes to organizing things, do I get rid of this? Do I keep this?
Mhm.
It's the feeling that is associated with these objects.
Exactly. It's
And
that oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I love that point, because I've seen how we infuse objects with meaning. And so we keep the object even for meaningful purposes. But when we detach the meaning from the object, we can hold on to the meaning and what's special and let go of the object itself. But no object intrinsically is meaningful. It's something that we bring to it. So we get to hold on to that.
Right. So true. Yeah, because you're not really getting the feeling from the object. It's through the people.
Yeah, it's just, it's there to kind of remind you. But if it's stuck in a box somewhere, you don't look at it for 10 years, it's not even doing that. So,
yeah, no, for sure. It's a good eye opener to, maybe just pause and when you're gift giving or whether you're saving something, just with everything, it's the why behind it. And just take a minute to really ask yourself,
exactly,
why am I saving this? Why am I giving this? Why am I keeping it? All of that. I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's truly unpacking. And if I could just highlight something you said about the pause, what we're really talking about here is mindfulness, right?
Yes.
Minimalism and mindfulness are the same thing. And it's the unpacking that we do and the paying attention and the pausing. That's really a mindfulness practice, but we're bringing that toward our daily lives, our calendars, our stuff, our drawers, and what have you. So, yeah, it could all work together seamlessly. We just have to give ourselves some time to do it.
Definitely. And you know what? I am going to call myself out on something because you pronounced your name Dara. And I think I pronounced it Dara. When I introduced you at the beginning, I had double checked to make sure because, and I even said, I know a Dara and I don't want to mess it up. I want to make sure. And you said, no, it's Dara. And I think I messed up. But anyway, Dara.
No problem at all. I'd much rather people hear my message than know how to pronounce my name. So
for sure. So where can listeners find you?
Well, I do have a website and it's called whylessequalsmore.com. So Less Equals More is the name of my business, but I put that why in there because it is about unpacking. It's not just about having less, it's which things we want to have less of and what we want to have more of. So you can find me on my website. I also use that handle on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook at whylessequalsmore. Yeah, and I would love to hear from all of your listeners. If anyone has questions, anyone can reach out to me and I'd be happy to answer them.
I love it. I love why less equals more. It's catchy. It sticks in your head. It's a good little motto, less equals more. Perfect. Well, everything will be in the show notes too. So definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time.
And thank you so much.
Great conversation. Thanks.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here as we kick off this podcast together. I really appreciate you joining me on this journey because I'm well aware you could be doing or listening to anything right now. Hey, if you enjoy the Authentically Raw content, please support the show by following, rating, and reviewing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can also follow me on social media for daily inspiration. Head over to my website, jamieberris.com, to sign up for weekly transformation tips. Or if you're interested in coaching, I currently have 3 openings for one-on-one coaching. If you're looking for an empowering community, we'd love for you to join us in the Transformation Tribe, our group coaching membership. More info available on my website under the Life Coaching and Membership tabs. One last thing, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic.